I've been a mother for 43 years. I have changed diapers at 3 a.m., driven through snowstorms to school plays, skipped my own doctor appointments to pay for hers. I have loved that girl with every last piece of my tired, aging heart. So when she stood in my kitchen, the kitchen I paid for, and looked straight into my eyes and said, "You disgusting old hag. I don't know why I keep you around. I want you to understand something." Something in me went very, very quiet. Not the quiet of surrender. The quiet of a woman who finally, after decades of giving, decides she is done. This is the story of what I did next. And I want every mother watching to hear it because I know some of you are living it too. My name is Dorothy May Calloway. I'm 67 years old. I live in a 3-bedroom house in Knoxville, Tennessee that I've owned for 31 years, bought with money from my late husband, Gerald, God rest him, and every side job I worked after he passed. I want you to picture this house. It's nothing fancy. A white porch. A vegetable garden along the side fence. Wind chimes Gerald hung the summer before he got sick. I've never taken them down. Inside, there's a kitchen that smells like coffee and cornbread on good days. Family photographs on every wall. Gerald smiling from our honeymoon in the Smokies. My son Michael at his college graduation. And my daughter, Cassie, in 100 different frames. Cassie at 6, missing her front teeth. Cassie at prom in a pink dress I saved 3 months to buy. Cassie on her wedding day. I am a widow. I am a grandmother. And until about 14 months ago, I believed I was a good mother. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because I need you to understand the full weight of what happened. Not just the ugly moment in the kitchen, but everything that led up to it. Because this story isn't really about one cruel sentence. It's about a pattern I refused to see for too long. About how love, when it's offered without any boundaries, doesn't always produce gratitude. Sometimes it produces something much uglier. I'm going to take you back to the beginning. To when Cassie was still small and the world felt full of promise. To understand where we ended up, you have to understand where we started. And more importantly, you have to understand the kind of mother I chose to be. Because I chose wrong. And I'm not too proud to admit that now. Pause for effect in narration. Gerald always said I gave too much of myself away. "Dottie," he used to say, folding his newspaper down the way he did, "you can't pour from an empty cup." I'd laugh and wave him off. I thought that was just something people said when they didn't understand what real love looked like. I was wrong about that too. Cassie was our second child. Michael came first, quiet, responsible, the kind of kid who cleaned his room without being asked. Cassie came along 18 months later, and from the very first week, she was different. Louder, more demanding, more present. Gerald used to joke that Cassie entered every room like she owned it and was already planning the renovations. We loved that about her. At first, she was bright. God, was she bright. Teachers called her gifted. She tested into advanced programs. Her 4th-grade teacher, Mrs. Holbrook, pulled me aside at parent night and said, "Mrs. Calloway, your daughter is extraordinary, but she needs to understand the world doesn't revolve around her." I nodded politely and drove home thinking Mrs. Holbrook just didn't understand Cassie the way I did. That was my first mistake. There were many more. When Cassie was 16, she started running with a faster crowd. Boys with cars and no curfews. Girls who smoked behind the bleachers. Gerald wanted to crack down. I smoothed things over. "She's just finding herself," I'd say. And when she crashed my car into the mailbox coming home at 2 a.m. and lied to my face about where she'd been, I let Gerald take the harder line while I quietly repaired the damage, emotional and physical, and whispered to Cassie that I understood. I was young once too. By the time she left for college at 18, I had established a pattern so deep I didn't even see it as a pattern. Cassie pushed. I bent.
Cassie took.
I gave more.
Cassie broke something.
I fixed it and handed it back without a word. Her college years were a blur of tuition payments I stretched to cover, phone calls at midnight when things went wrong with roommates or boyfriends, emergency deposits into her account when she miscalculated her budget. Michael worked his way through school on a partial scholarship and a part-time job. Cassie's education cost me and Gerald every dollar of the small inheritance my own mother left me. I never once told her that. Gerald passed when Cassie was 24 and Michael was 26. Pancreatic cancer. 91 days from diagnosis to the last breath. I held his hand at the end and I made him a promise I shouldn't have made, that I would always be there for the children. Both of them, no matter what. In the grief and fog of those first months, without Gerald, Cassie moved back home. She said it was to help me. I told myself that was true, but it wasn't Cassie helping me. It was me absorbing Cassie's chaos while also trying to process losing the man I'd shared my life with for 38 years. She brought her boyfriend, Derek, with her. Derek was 31, unemployed, and had a look on his face like he was doing the world a favor just by being in it. He slept until noon. He left dishes in the sink. He borrowed my car without asking. And when I, very gently, very carefully, suggested to Cassie that maybe he might look for work, she looked at me with something cold in her eyes and said, "Don't start, Mom."
So I didn't start.
Over the next 2 years, I paid for a wedding I couldn't really afford because Cassie said she wanted it and I couldn't bear to say no. $13,000 on a venue, catering, flowers. I wore the same dress I'd bought on sale at Belk's and told myself it was fine. I danced at my daughter's wedding with a smile plastered to my face and a credit card statement at home I was afraid to look at. Derek and Cassie moved into an apartment, then a bigger apartment. Then they started talking about a house. And somehow, I still can't fully explain the mechanics of how this happened. Somehow I found myself co-signing a mortgage and writing a check for their down payment. $40,000. Money I had set aside for my own future, for my own care.
Gone.
Michael called me when he found out. He was careful with his words, he always is. "Mom," he said quietly, "that money was yours. You know that, right? Things might have stayed at a dull, manageable ache if it hadn't been for the grandchildren." Cassie and Derek had two, Mason, who was 5, and little Lily, who just turned 3. I adore those babies. Still do. And Cassie knew it. She started using them as leverage. At first it was subtle. If I expressed any mild frustration, if I so much as sighed when Cassie canceled plans for the 4th time in a row, she'd go quiet and then say, almost too casually, "I just don't know if it's good for the kids to be around stress." And I'd backpedal. I'd apologize. I'd show up the next day with cookies and open arms. This is the part one I'm most ashamed of now. I let myself be managed like a puppet, and I told myself it was love. Then came the summer Derek lost his job, again, the 3rd time in 4 years, and Cassie called me in tears saying they couldn't make the mortgage payment. I was on a fixed income. My Social Security, a small pension from my 30 years working administrative at the county school board, and whatever I could squeeze from a savings account that was already hollowed out. But I gave her the money. 2 mortgage payments. Because of Mason. Because of Lily. Because I lay awake imagining my grandchildren without a home, and I could not bear it. Michael came for Thanksgiving that year. He sat across from Cassie at my table, ate the meal I'd cooked, and barely spoke. Afterward, he helped me with the dishes and said, very quietly so she couldn't hear, "Mom, I'm worried about you. This isn't sustainable." I told him he was overreacting. The day it happened was a Tuesday in February. Ordinary in every way. Cold, gray sky. I had soup on the stove. I'd been watching Mason and Lily for 3 days straight because Derek and Cassie had gone to a resort in Gatlinburg, a trip I had quietly, stupidly helped fund, believing Cassie when she said they needed a break for their marriage. I was tired. Not just physically tired, the deep tired that lives in your bones when you've been giving for decades without a real rest. The kids had been wonderful, but 3 days is a long time at 67. My back was aching. I'd had maybe 1 full night of sleep. When Cassie and Derek came through my front door that afternoon, I felt relief. I had dinner ready. The house was clean. The kids were fed, bathed, dressed in the clothes Cassie had packed. I made one comment.
"One,"
I said, and I remember the exact words because I've turned them over in my mind 1,000 times since. "Cassie, honey, I just want to mention that Lily's been fighting a little cold. You might want to keep an eye on it." Cassie didn't look up from her phone. She said, "She's fine." I said gently, "I know, I'm a little worried because she had a rough night and I want to make sure." And that's when Cassie looked up. Her face was something I had never seen before on my daughter's face. Not irritation. Not impatience. Something worse.
Contempt. "Oh my God," she said.
"Can you stop? Just stop.
"You are so exhausting."
You make everything about yourself. You always have." She took one step toward me and her voice dropped into something cold and precise. "You disgusting old hag. I don't know why I keep you around." Derek said nothing. He picked up the children's bags and walked to the car. Mason looked at me over his shoulder with wide, confused eyes. Lily was already crying. And my daughter, turned and walked out of the house I had paid for and never looked back. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after they left. The soup was still simmering. Gerald's wind chimes rang softly on the porch. And I stood very, very still. I want to be honest with you about what happened inside me in that silence, because I think it's the most important part of this story. The part no one talks about. The first thing I felt was not anger. It was shame. I stood in my own kitchen, in my own home, and felt ashamed, as if maybe she was right. Maybe I was too much. Too needy. Too old and worn and useless. That thought sat in my chest like a stone, and I am embarrassed to tell you how heavy it was. Then the tears came. The ugly kind. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table Gerald and I bought at an estate sale in 1989, and I cried until I couldn't anymore. Not the polite, composed kind of crying. The kind that comes from somewhere so deep in you it feels animal. I thought about calling Michael. I picked up the phone twice and put it back down. I didn't want him to say, "I told you so," even gently, even with love. For about 48 hours, I went through a version of grief I hadn't felt since Gerald died. The grief of losing something you believed in completely. Because here is the truth I had to face. I had not just lost my daughter's respect in that moment. I had watched it be destroyed over years and years and years, and I had helped destroy it. By never saying no. By never holding a line. By teaching her, quietly and consistently, that I had no value except what I could provide. By the third day, something shifted. I was sitting on the porch with my morning coffee, watching the garden, and I thought, I am 67 years old. I may have 20 good years left if I'm lucky. And I absolutely refuse, to spend them like this. I called Michael. I told him everything. The exact words Cassie had used. The months of manipulation. The money. All of it. Things I had never told another living soul. There was a long silence on the line. Then Michael said, "Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Are you listening?" "Yes," I said. "What she said to you is not okay. It was never okay. And you have spent 40 years making excuses for behavior that was never okay. I love Cassie. She is my sister. But what she has done to you, what she has taken from you, I can't sit quietly about it anymore." He flew in from Cincinnati that weekend. He slept in his old bedroom, the one with the Tennessee Volunteers pennant still tacked above the window, and the two of us sat at the kitchen table for an entire Saturday afternoon, and we made a list. Not a list of grievances. A list of assets. Everything that was mine. Everything I had given that was still technically, legally mine to reclaim. The cosign mortgage. Michael connected me with a real estate attorney. The car title I'd transferred to Cassie's name 2 years ago because she said she needed reliable transportation and I still had my own vehicle. Also mine to address. The storage unit full of Gerald's furniture and tools that Cassie had taken over without asking. The antique jewelry from my mother that had somehow migrated to Cassie's house during a move I'd helped with. Item by item. We made the list. And for the first time in years, I felt something I recognized as strength. It was Michael who found the bank statements. I hadn't asked him to look. He'd noticed a discrepancy while helping me organize my financial documents for a meeting with my accountant. Cassie had been using a joint account that Gerald and I had originally set up for household emergencies. It was technically still in both our names, mine and Cassie's, from a period years ago when she'd had access for a specific short-term purpose. I had forgotten it existed. I assumed it was empty. It was not empty. Over the course of approximately 14 months, Cassie had made transfers out of that account. Small ones, irregular enough not to trigger automatic flags. Groceries, utilities, a car repair. All things she'd mentioned to me in passing, things I'd nodded along to believing she was covering herself. The total was just over $9,000. I sat with that number for a long time. $9,000. Not a fortune. But it was mine. It was the remnants of a life Gerald and I had built together. It was the quiet security of a woman on a fixed income. And it had been taken without a question, without a thank you, and almost certainly without a second thought. Michael was careful with how he told me. He sat across from me and kept his voice level. But I saw his jaw tighten. I saw the thing he was controlling. "Mom," he said, "I don't want to push you into anything you're not ready for, but I need you to know what you're dealing with, so you can make informed choices." I thought about Cassie's face, the contempt, the words. "You disgusting old hag. I don't know why I keep you around." I made my choice. I did not call Cassie. I did not send a text. I did not announce what was coming. The first thing I did, quietly, legally, and with the guidance of my attorney, was remove Cassie from the joint account. Every institution, every shared financial instrument.
Done.
The second thing I did was call the bank holding the mortgage and inform them that I had been placed under financial duress when I co-signed and that I would be retaining legal counsel regarding the circumstances. I won't go into the full legal details here, but my attorney was clear with me. I had options. The third thing, and this one hurt more than I expected, was sending a certified letter to Cassie's home. My attorney drafted it. It was professional and completely unemotional. It requested the return of several specific items of personal property, my mother's jewelry, 3 pieces of Gerald's woodworking equipment, and a specific cedar chest that had been in my family for 4 generations. I then waited. Cassie called within 48 hours. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was not an apology. It was confused and then quickly angry. How dare I? What was I trying to pull? Who did I think I was? She called again. I let it go again. On the third call, I answered. The conversation was not what she expected. She had prepared, I think, for tears, for me to fold, for me to apologize for upsetting her. Instead, she got a woman who had spent 3 quiet weeks making peace with the hardest decision of her life. I said, "Cassie, I love you. I will always love you. But I will not be spoken to that way again. Not by you. Not by anyone. What you said to me in that kitchen was unacceptable, and what I have discovered about the account is unacceptable, and I am done accepting things that are unacceptable. If you want a relationship with me, it will be one built on mutual respect. I am happy to work toward that, but I am not willing to be the only one working." She hung up. The cedar chest was returned. The jewelry was returned. Gerald's tools were returned. The mortgage situation took 4 months to resolve, and I won't pretend it was clean or easy, but I was removed from the cosign without the legal action I had feared. My attorney was worth every penny. I closed the joint account entirely and opened a new one, just my name, just mine. I changed my banking passwords. I reviewed every recurring charge, every automatic payment, every financial thread that connected me to Cassie's life. I cut what I had the legal right to cut. And then I waited again. Because the hardest part wasn't any of that. The hardest part was Mason and Lily. For 6 weeks, I heard nothing from them. No calls. No visits. No little voice on the phone saying, "Grammy, I miss you." 6 weeks. And I want to be honest, that nearly broke me. I would sit on the porch in the evenings and wonder if I had made the right choice. If protecting myself had cost me the babies I adored. Then Michael called to tell me that Derek, apparently operating entirely apart from Cassie on this one, bless him, had quietly reached out and asked if I'd like to meet him and the kids for lunch. Just them. Just us. I met them at a diner near Mason's school on a Wednesday afternoon. Mason ran to me from across the parking lot with his arms out. Lily buried her face in my neck and smelled like strawberry shampoo. I cried in my car for 20 minutes afterward. Grateful tears. The kind that clean you out. It's been 8 months now. I want to tell you what I've learned, not as a lecture, but as one woman speaking honestly to another. I spent 40 years believing that a good mother was a mother who never said no. That love was measured in sacrifice. That if I ever put myself first, even once, I was selfish. I carried that belief like a religion, and it cost me my savings, my security, my peace of mind, and eventually my daughter's respect. Because here is what unlimited giving without boundaries actually teaches the people you love. It teaches them that you don't matter, that your comfort is optional, that your feelings are a minor inconvenience compared to their wants. I didn't teach Cassie to be cruel, but I taught her, very consistently, that there were no consequences for being unkind to me. I have thought a great deal about my own mother in these months. She was a harder woman than I ever was, more exacting, less soft. I sometimes resented it when I was young, but she raised a daughter who could survive, who could stand in a cold kitchen after being torn down and choose to stand up anyway. My mother knew something I forgot. Love without limits isn't love. It's erasure. Cassie and I have spoken twice in 8 months. Both conversations were brief and careful. She has not apologized, not in words, but there have been small things. A birthday card with her handwriting. A photograph of the kids she texted me on a random Thursday afternoon without explanation. I am not ready to call it progress, but I notice it. I am not waiting for her. I have stopped waiting for things from Cassie. That, more than anything, is what has brought me peace. There is a woman in my church, Marvell, she's 82, who lost a child to estrangement 20 years ago and never repaired it before the child died. She carries that with a quiet, permanent grief that I notice in her eyes at moments she doesn't know I'm watching. I think about Marvell often. I think about the version of the story where I did nothing, where I swallowed those words, disgusting old hag, and went right back to what I was doing, where I bent one more time and lost the last of myself in the bending. That version of me ends up like Marvell, not because of estrangement but because of disappearance. Because I would have simply kept disappearing until there was nothing left to disappear. I sit on my porch most evenings now. Gerald's wind chimes still sing. The garden came in beautifully this spring. Tomatoes, green beans, the black-eyed Susans along the fence. I have a new routine. Morning walks. Tuesday lunches with Michael when he's in town. Wednesday afternoons at a watercolor class I signed up for on a whim and turned out to love. I am 67 years old and I am, for the first time in a very long time, living a life that is mine. I do not know how things with Cassie will end.
I have made my peace with not knowing.
What I do know is this. Whatever happens next, I will face it as a woman who chose herself, who held her line, who loved her daughter enough to stop enabling her. And if you are watching this, if you are a mother or a grandmother who recognizes herself in any part of what I've said, I want you to hear me. It is not too late. You are allowed to matter. You are allowed to say, this is enough. My name is Dorothy May Calloway, and I took my life back.